October, the far corner of the car park by the 24-hour supermarket. The corner where nobody moves us on. Us, who live in our vehicles. The lights stay on till morning here. The water and the toilets are open till midnight, and the wet tarmac after the rain holds the glow of the buzzing sign even in the spots the ordinary lamps don't reach. 4th year I've been living like this, in a converted camper van, working on jobs right across the city, fitting and servicing systems, one district today, another in a week. And a car park like this one is one of the few places you can pull in without a conversation and without a fine, for the whole night if you need it. Right now, I'm kneeling on the roof of my own home, working a roof hatch loose with a screwdriver, while down below, a car park security guard's holding the stepladder for me, a lad in an orange jacket who was out on his rounds and caught me already up top. I explained to him, not looking up from the work, that my camper van's door isn't letting me in again, and it's not the kind of fault you call someone out for and have fixed by evening. The lock's fine. I've checked it 100 times standing inside. The key turns easy. The cylinder's not worn. But from outside, the handle just won't move, as if there's a solid block of metal poured in under the panel instead of a mechanism. Here, I tell him, chuck me the flathead. This one's not gripping. He hands me the other one without a word, and I dig my fingers back into the edge of the hatch, go quiet for a couple of seconds while I press harder, and only finish the sentence once I let my hands off to rest. The wind up here is a fair bit sharper than down at ground level. It drags the damp off the car park after the rain and carries some torn loose plastic bag across the roof. And the supermarket sign lights me up from underneath so I can see my own shadow thrown across the next camper van. Long, hunched, screwdriver stretched out in one hand. It's been like this a few months now, I explained down to him. Not every evening, but often enough that I stopped keeping a spare key separate in the van and started carrying the hatch tool with me instead. Like it's just part of the usual kit now, same as anyone living on wheels. Right there with the jack and the spare tow rope for when you get stuck somewhere on a dirt track. The first time it happened, it was right here too. This same car park. I'd got back late from a job, already dark. The door gave way under my hand the way it always did. I went in, put the kettle on, stepped out for a minute to take a bag of rubbish to the bin by the fence. And that was it. The door outside just stopped opening. I pulled it, pushed it, turned the key both ways. Nothing would give. And inside, the light was still burning in a steady yellow square in the window, 1.5 meters away. And I couldn't reach it, no matter what. That was the first time I noticed what I've felt in my hand ever since. The moment I so much as take hold of that door. There's a weight in my hand that shouldn't be there. More than an ordinary aluminum camper van door has any business weighing. Heavier by exactly that much. As if what you're holding isn't a light sheet of metal on hinges, but the door of a safe. And it doesn't shut with a bang from the wind. It shuts tight, slow, drawing itself right up to the click, no matter how gently the hand letting go of it moves. The mechanic I went to a week after that just spread his hands in the workshop, said the lock was in perfect condition, the cylinder wasn't sticking, the hinges were greased. He'd never seen anything like it before, and had nothing to suggest except replacing the whole lock, which I did. The new lock did exactly the same thing 3 weeks later, at a different car park out of town. And that's when I decided it was never about the cylinder or the hinges at all. That something else entirely was going on. Something I wasn't going to understand no matter how much hardware I changed. For a while I tried arguing with the door in the plainest way I could think of. wedging a brick under it whenever I stepped out for a short while so it physically couldn't swing shut all the way. And once it very nearly worked. Except, in the morning, I found the brick wasn't outside under the threshold where I'd left it. It was inside the camper van, right by the door, as if something had carried it in behind itself, quite carefully, and set it down in exactly the same spot, only on the other side of the lock. I checked the door that morning too, took hold of it with nothing propping it open anymore, and there in my hand was the same excess weight as the first time. Not a gram heavier and not a gram lighter. Except now I understood it was never about the brick at all. It was about how precisely I'd been trying to trick it. After that, I tied the door to the metal handrail by the step with a rope, pulled it so tight the panel couldn't reach the latch at all, and the door still shut with the rope inside it, the knot still whole, and the loose end I'd left outside for myself turned up inside too, drawn tight, as if it had been pulled through a gap that physically wasn't there. That's when I understood the door doesn't fight harder if I try harder. It simply answers exactly what I do, precisely that much and not a gram more. And the more carefully I try to outwit it, the more carefully it adjusts to my trick and leaves me outside with the same result all over again. The weight in my hand doesn't grow from one time to the next. I'm certain of that. I've deliberately compared how it feels tonight with how it felt half a year ago, and it's the same heaviness, the very same safe door weight of an aluminium sheet. Only now I know there's no point arguing with it, and I've stopped trying new ways to outsmart it. Left the brick in the boot, and what's left of that rope too, just in case, though I don't touch either of them anymore. The guard asks from below why I even go back to it if I already know it won't open. Why bother trying the handle at all when the answer's nearly always the same? I tell him it's a habit, that the door does open sometimes. No pattern to it, no warning, and it'd be daft to climb straight up onto the roof without checking down here first. Even tonight, I tell him. Before I climbed up here, I did what I always do. Took hold of the handle down there by the step, held it a second, felt that same excess weight in my hand, a heaviness that turns up the moment my fingers touch the metal. And I knew from that feeling alone, before I'd even pulled, that it wasn't going to open again tonight. Because a door that's about to let me in never feels that heavy to the touch. And one that's about to refuse always presses the same weight into your palm, every single time. As if somebody unseen on the other side of the hinges has already taken hold of the panel from the far side and is holding it in exact balance against my hand. He shines the torch down at my feet while I edge closer to the hatch itself and says nothing, and I go on talking down to him myself. That I've no plans to sell this van and rent a room somewhere nearer the center of town. That the home itself is perfectly ordinary in every other way. The sleeping bag's warm, the stove works, the water tank never runs dry. And the one strange thing in this whole camper van is that door. Or rather, what happens to it exactly the moment I end up outside and there's nobody inside, and there can't be. I always check through the window before climbing up. The lights burning steady, the curtains hanging still, nothing in there moves, and nothing ever has in all these months. The hatch finally gives under the screwdriver. The gap opens a couple of centimeters. I get my fingers into it and pull the rest of the way without the tool now. Feel the cold night air move in through the gap into the dark of the camper van. And right at that moment, the door down below, the very one I was just standing at, gives a small shudder on its hinges, all on its own. No wind, no reason for it. As if it's making one last check that I really haven't changed my mind about coming back down to it and have actually gone round the long way over the roof. The guard notices it too, freezes where he's standing with the stepladder in his hands, and I tell him from up top that he didn't imagine it. It always does that. Once it understands I've got home after all, just by a different route, and that I stopped being surprised by that little movement a long time ago. It's a bit like a small window banging in a draft, only there's no draft. I climb down inside through the hatch opening, widened by me last year for exactly these occasions. Put my feet on the fold-down shelf under the ceiling, then the table, then the floor. And the first thing I do once I'm inside is look at that same door from the other side now, from inside, where everything's as it should be. The lock's whole, the keys where I left it this morning, nothing shifted, nothing touched. Ever since I welded a short ladder onto the back of the camper van, I've been using this route for the 3rd year running whenever I get home late and already know the door might not let me in. And I've altered the hatch so it opens from inside with one turn of the handle, and from outside, from the roof, it still gives 2, just slower and with a tool. I use the door now almost only for the rubbish. I go out with the bag, put my boot in the gap the moment I step over the threshold, hold the panel with the toe of my boot for those few seconds it takes to carry the bag to the bin, and come back the same way while the boot's still holding the gap open. Because the moment it slips even for an instant, the door will take that chance and shut. I've tested it too many times to have any doubts left. I don't change the lock anymore. There's no point in it. I stopped ringing the mechanic and asking the neighbors on the car park for advice a long time ago, because there's no way to explain in words that the weight in my hand turns up exactly when the door's about to let me down, while lightness, on the other hand, promises an easy way in with no delay. It's something felt by the hand, not put into words. While unlatching the hatch shut from inside, I hear the guard outside lowering the stepladder and carrying it back to his booth by the entrance. And in this last moment, already sitting inside by the table, I rest my palm on the inside of the door out of habit, just to check, and feel the same weight there's always been. Exactly the same, not a gram more. Because from the inside the door was never heavy. It only turns heavy for the hand that reaches for it from outside. And that's how I've been living for 3 years now, lifting my eyes in the evenings, first to the hatch in the ceiling, and only after that, if I manage it, to the door itself. You arrive at the impound yard at the end of September, right at opening time, when the painted iron gates are still bolted shut from the inside, and the dog chained by the gatehouse is already barking at everyone in turn, yanking the rusty wire until it sings. The wind drags dust across the concrete slabs, lifts dry twigs and scraps of packing film off the ground, and carries them along the long chain-link fence, behind which rows of vehicles stand, some strangers, some not quite, lorries with sagging tarpaulins, cars with cracked windscreens, minibuses stripped of their number plates. Yours was taken 3 evenings ago, the tow truck pulling up while you were still brewing tea on the camping stove and hadn't even cleared the table, and by morning you were already being told over the phone where to go and which bundle of papers to bring, which bus would get you out to the industrial estate, because there's no way here on your own 2 feet, short of hitching a lift. A motorhome isn't a weekend runabout. It's your whole home of the last few years, the only place where your crockery is, your clothes, your bed, and you're the first one standing at the gatehouse hatch, long before anyone even turns up to open it, shifting your weight by the iron door alongside a handful of other early arrivals who've come for their own vehicles, and stand staring at their feet in silence, not speaking to each other. The yard attendant doesn't come out straight away. Spends a long while hunting for your number in a ruled notebook, running his finger down the lines, frowning, finding it, nodding to himself, and then leads you in, past the dog straining its chain in your direction and choking on its own barking, past rows of lorries and cars parked tight, side by side, along cracks in the concrete gone thick with dry autumn grass, to the very far corner of the yard, where between a heavy lorry and an old minibus stands your white motorhome, curtains drawn, leaning slightly to one side where a tire has gone flat. The battery's already been taken out, he explains this straight away, matter of fact. There's no power inside, and there won't be all week while the paperwork goes through. And the nights here fall below freezing, the estate swept clean through by wind, no shelter from it anywhere between the rows of metal. The attendant unlocks the door with his own key, lets you in for a couple of minutes to check nothing's been touched, everything's still where it should be, and you step into the cold, into the familiar smell of chilled metal and plastic, into the same cramped closeness where everything still stands exactly where it stood the evening they came for you. You reach out of habit for the table, where the mug has stood since the day you left, tea gone cold and half drunk, and you take hold of the handle to move it aside so it won't spill on the papers. And the handle is still warm under your fingers, as if the tea had been poured a minute ago, not 3 days back. You don't dwell on it. No telling what a mind imagines in a dark, cold box this early in the morning. And the attendant is already hurrying you from the doorway. 10 more rounds like this one still to get through his shift. And you follow him out, carrying with you only the feeling in your palm, which you've got nothing yet to compare it to. You are called back a few days later for the paperwork, again right at opening time, again through the same gates, past the same dog, which for some reason doesn't bark this time, just watches, straining its chain to the limit, and follows you with its eyes all the way to the far row, as if it's learned your walk. There's a bigger crowd at the gatehouse hatch this morning than last time. A man in a work jacket arguing under his breath about some form. A woman holding a folder of documents so tightly you can see her fingers shaking. And you join the line, wait your turn in silence, scanning the rows of vehicles behind the fence, trying to pick out the roof of your own home among them. It's a different attendant this time, but the rule's the same. You're let in for a couple of minutes, under watch, while you dig through the locker above the bunk for the right folder, sorting through old receipts, the logbook, a road map folded up that you haven't used in a year. You take a towel off the shelf to wipe the dust off your hands after rooting through the locker, and it's still damp, as if it had been lifted off the hook after yesterday's shower. Not left hanging 5 days in a freezing vehicle with not one person inside it. On the table, where a glass of water used to stand, there's a wet ring left behind. Not the pale, dried-out circle you'd get from standing there for days and slowly evaporating, but a fresh, dark one, as though someone's hand had only just lifted the glass away. You run a finger over it. Your finger comes away damp, and you stand there a second longer than you need to, looking at this glistening mark on the dusty table. And then you wipe your finger on your trouser leg, trying not to dwell on it too long, because the attendant is already checking his watch and telling you it's time to close up. There's still a queue at the gate. Closer to the end of the week, you're called back again, this time for some kind of inventory check, a formality. 10 minutes inside, under the eye of the same attendant from that first day. He recognizes you, nods like an old acquaintance, leads you the same way past the same rows where the vehicles no longer stand quite as they did on Monday. One's been driven off, another shifted nearer the fence, and it makes the whole row feel unfamiliar, rearranged from scratch. You cross the yard again, past the gatehouse, past the dog, which starts barking the moment it spots you from a distance, as if it knows you now. And this time, the barking feels almost familiar, almost an unthreatening sound of the day. Inside the house, it's still as cold as it should be, in a vehicle with no power, on the tail end of a September night. The windows fogged up from the inside, a thin crust of frost lying on the floor by the door. And yet, when you reach out of habit for the bread left on the table that last evening, the loaf is still soft under your fingers, as if it had been baked that same morning, not forgotten 5 days ago in a freezing iron box out in the wind. You break off a small piece, and the crumbs don't fall away dry the way they should from stale bread, but give under your fingers, leaving a faint dampness on them. And you don't eat the piece, just set it back on the table next to that same wet ring from the glass, which still hasn't dried after all these days. And you wipe your hand on your trouser leg, exactly the way you did last time, telling yourself it doesn't mean anything. That a vehicle just stays dry and warm longer than it seems from outside. That this happens with a sealed iron box left in the sun even late in autumn. Next time you're let in for what turns out to be the second to last visit of the whole week, one more formality before the case is supposed to finally move forward. The gatehouse hatch is almost empty this morning. Just you and an elderly man who gives up waiting for his turn and leaves without hearing out whatever they're telling him about some missing certificate. You cross the yard to the far row alone this time, no attendant leading the way, because this time they just unlock the door and tell you to wait outside while they check the chassis number, and you end up with a little more time inside than on the previous visits, and you're almost not surprised anymore by what's supposed to happen with the things in there, almost expecting it in advance, reaching out of habit for the table, and this time, of all times, nothing happens. Your hand lands on the same mug handle, and the mug is cold. Exactly as cold as it should be after so many days in a frozen vehicle with no one living in it. You touch the towel on its hook, and it's dry, brittle at the folds, the way fabric gets when it hasn't seen water in a long while. You take the same piece of bread off the shelf, the one you broke off last time, and it's hard as stone now, crumbling into dry flakes on the floor, on the dusty boards. Nothing in here is still warm. Nothing is still damp. Nothing is still soft. And this, exactly this ordinary dryness, this correct cold stillness that should have been there the whole time from the very start, is somehow heavier than anything you touched here before that was warm and soft. As if the house understood overnight, once and for all, that there was no longer anyone to wait for, and stopped keeping that evening alive inside itself. You stand in the middle of the cramped, chilled-through space a little longer than you should, looking over the shelves, the table, the towel on its hook, as if searching for something that ought to have stayed and hasn't. And then you hear the attendant knocking on the door from outside, and you step out. The door closes behind you a little earlier than usual. The attendant hurries you towards the gate, and you cross the yard without looking back at the far row, where between the heavy lorry and the minibus your house stands, gone cold inside for good now. On the last day of the week, you're told through the gatehouse hatch to come back tomorrow. The paperwork still hasn't matched up somewhere. In another office you have no access to and aren't let into either, only told over the phone, through other people, that the matter's being sorted, that you need to wait a little longer. You stand by the chain link fence, looking from a distance at the white roof beyond the lorries, not going in among the rows, because the attendant is busy today and there's no one to let you through. And the dog by the gate is silent, lying on its side in the shade of the gatehouse with its paws stretched out, and the wind carries dust along the fence, exactly the way it did on the first day, lifting the same dry twigs, circling them by the same concrete slabs, as if nothing here has changed all week, except what's changed inside you and inside the house standing in the far row. You drive away from the yard, leaving the house standing there between the heavy lorry and the minibus. And the tomorrow you were promised stretches into days, then into weeks without a single clear phone call. And at some point you stop driving out to the chain link fence altogether because it becomes plain. The storage period has run out, and the paperwork that was supposed to put everything back in order never fell into place, and the case has moved further up the chain without you, with no right to ask exactly where it's got stuck. 6 months on, you're walking down an unfamiliar street on the other side of town, on some errand, not thinking about the yard or the industrial estate or the dog on its chain. And on the opposite side, right by the curb, among a row of other people's parked cars, stands your house. The bodywork's been repainted a different color, but you recognize the shape of the windows and the door at once. No doubt about it. No need to go closer and check anything. There are curtains at the windows that aren't yours. A rubber mat someone else laid out that morning is drying on the tarmac beneath the wheels. The door stands wide open, and from inside comes the ordinary daytime sound of somebody else's life. And you stand on your side of the street exactly as long as you need to, long enough to know everything there is to know, and then you cross the road and walk on past, without stopping, without looking back at the open door, on to wherever it was you were going.
Lie down, lie down. Why are you hovering there by the steps? Let me get this made up for you quickly. Just give me a second. I'll clear the table first. My husband and I have a big motorhome. We've taken this same campsite for the 3rd year running, end of July, right on the sea. One of the big chain sites, known the length of the coast. Cars parked 4 rows deep all the way to the barrier, row after row, awning to awning. Someone's already grilling something a couple of pitches down from us. Music drifting up from the beach, even though it's gone 11. Somewhere far off, past the rows, children are shouting, though not near us. That's over by the shower block. The queue there always takes longest to clear. Won't be gone before midnight tonight, I shouldn't think. It's warm inside. The day's heat has built up. All the windows are wide open. The fan pushes the air back and forth through the whole cabin, and it actually feels good to breathe in it. A cool little draft across the cheek. And the sheet I'm putting down for you tonight is clean, fresh, still a bit cool, just out of the cupboard. I kept it back specially for this evening. I knew someone would end up staying the night. Your tent never really went up properly. The pegs don't hold at all in this sand. I told you back on the beach when we got talking. Come along if you need to. We've got room. We're used to taking people in. 3 seasons running now. It's a habit by this point. Look how it works. The table stands all day. We have lunch on it, dinner, sometimes cards in the evening, and come night, I take the tabletop off just like this, carefully, both hands, slide it into the grooves along the wall so it's out of the way. Then I pull the mattress out from under the seat. It's not thick, but it's soft. It'll do you fine. I unfold it, smooth it out along the full length, pull the sheet over, tuck the corners in neatly on each side so it doesn't slip by morning. Change the pillowcase, plump the pillow on top, turn the cover back at the corner so it's easier to climb in. There, that's you done. Lie down. The top bunk's always the best sleep here. The fan really gets to it up there, one steady stream of air. Your eyelids will go heavy from the sea on their own. You must be worn out and salty after the day. Look at you, already dropping off. You'd already lain down, turned onto your side, and asked me sleepily who I'd made the bed downstairs for, seeing as it's just the 2 of us staying tonight. And honestly, I hadn't even looked over there.
I don't answer straight away, because downstairs there really is a bed made up. By the window, on that side, the pillow plumped just so, the sheet tucked in on every corner, the cover turned back at the corner, and that corner always faces the very same way. I didn't make it, I promise you that, and my husband didn't either. He's long since asleep in the cab on his own side. He's got his own bunk through there. He doesn't so much as glance that way after supper. It started for us that summer, 3 years back now. We were parked in almost this same row that time, a bit closer to the water, an evening just as warm and close, and a man came over to us. A neighbor a few pitches along. His car had died on him, battery completely flat, no chance of getting to a garage before morning, and nobody fancies a night in a cold cab in summer. So we said, "Stay, there's room. Our table folds down into a bed after all." I made it up for him exactly the way I've just made yours, with my own hands. And in the morning, I came out with the kettle and saw his bed already folded away, neater even than I fold it myself. The corners turned in dead straight, and there he was sitting outside, thanking us, saying he'd slept well, soft as anything. I didn't think much of it at the time. Some people are just tidy, used to clearing up after themselves. Then, a few days later, at a different site altogether, well out of town, closer to another stretch of sea, we took someone in for the night again, and that was when I really noticed it for the first time. The bed I was carrying my linen over to make up was already done by the time I got there with the sheets in my hands. The pillow plumped, the sheet tucked in, the cover turned back at that same corner, the same side, as though someone had already gone through ahead of me and done it all for me. And I'm standing there with an armful of linen, not knowing whether to be grateful or unsettled. But the evening was warm, the guests were tired, and I told myself I must have made it up earlier myself and simply forgotten. It happens. The next summer there were 2 at once, young lads, canoeists. Their camp had almost washed away. The water came up in the night. Everything soaked through. Well, where else could they go? So we took them in. I thought it would be a tight fit, only the one table, not enough room. But it worked out exactly right, as if the place had already known there'd be 2 of them. Both berths were already standing made up when my husband and I stepped inside with the torch. Both pillows plumped the very same way, both sheets tucked in with the very same movement, as if one hand had made them both up, not different guests on different nights using the same spot. My husband joked that we were running a hotel, and I said nothing, because I was already starting to notice. It isn't us settling the guests in for the night. It's the house doing it by itself, without any part from us, quietly, while we're asleep or busy with something else. Then another summer on. The family from the next pitch. A mother with her grown-up daughter. Their car and trailer got stuck coming into the site. A wheel dropped into a rut. Evening coming on, getting dark. The wardens couldn't help till morning. The man on duty just spread his hands. So we offered. Stay the night. No sense fighting with a trailer in the dark. Call the recovery truck in the morning. There were 2 of them, but 3 beds turned up made inside. The third right by the door, neat, tightly tucked in, unused all evening. And the mother asked me the next morning, over breakfast, over tea already, sort of in passing, who else had stayed the night with them. She said towards morning she'd reached out to that third bed in the dark, half asleep, and felt that the cover was already turned back, exactly the same way it had been the evening before, as if nobody had touched it in the night, as if it had simply lain there, untouched, ready, and there'd been nobody else in the place at all. I checked. The windows were latched shut from inside. The door had been on the catch since the evening. We didn't really talk about it much between ourselves after that summer. I said to my husband one evening, once everyone had driven off and we were sitting by the door on our own,
that this business with the beds had started to unsettle me, that it all came together too easily somehow, too neatly, and he just shrugged, took a sip of his tea. "Well, it's handy, isn't it?" he said. "Why turn that down? The guests are warm, we're not run off our feet, the place manages it, and it's not as though you and I are doing anyone any harm. Quite the opposite." And it did manage. Not once in all those nights did anyone go without a bed. Not once did a bed turn up crumpled or untidy. Always fresh, as if straight out of the laundry. Always with the same corner turned back the same way. I stopped even keeping count of how many guests we took in over a summer. I just made up my own, upstairs or wherever I was told, and the rest somehow settled itself by nightfall, without any part from me, without my hands, while I was off talking to someone or washing up outside. The busiest night of all came the summer before last, getting on for August. When a whole group washed up at ours from the beach, something had gone wrong with their cabin booking. The office had muddled it up. There wasn't a free spot on the whole site that evening. Not in our row, not further along by the water either. And it was well on towards midnight, people tired, sunburnt from the day. One or two of them had seen me on the beach before. One remembered my husband. So they asked if they could stay the night, and of course we took them. Where else were people meant to go at that hour? Our place seemed to open up from the inside that evening. I didn't even try counting how many of them there were. They came in one after another, kicking off their shoes at the door, and there was room enough regardless. Nobody got in anybody's way. Nobody was left squeezed into a corner. Everyone found somewhere to lie down. Everyone got their own sheet, fresh, tucked in tight on both sides. Every pillow plumped just so, and every cover turned back with the same corner, the same side, as though someone had already gone right through the place ahead of time, with the very same careful movement of the hand, and made up exactly as many beds as would be needed that night. Not one more, not one fewer. And my husband and I stood by the door a long while that morning, watching the guests head off to their cars, content, rested, each of them with their own towel and rucksack. Then, on our very last night of that season, before we drove home, we hadn't called anyone over. We were too tired. We went to bed early, and just before sleep, I went down anyway for a glass of water. And there below, by the window, was a bed made up, though we'd had no guests at all that evening. No neighbor with a dead car, no family, no group from the beach, nobody at all. The pillow plumped, the sheet tucked in, the cover turned back at the same corner, the same side, as though the place had gone ahead and made room anyway, just in case, for someone who, that night, never turned up. I stood by that bed for a moment, touched the sheet, cool, fresh, as though it had just been made up by someone else's hands, and went back up to my own side, said nothing to my husband till morning, just lay down beside him and listened to the fan going back and forth. My husband and I have already decided it back at the start of this August. Talked it over quietly so as not to wake the neighbors, that this season will be the last one where our table folds down into a bed. Once we're home, he'll take the upper shelves off for good, unscrew the brackets with his tools. We'll throw out both spare mattresses, give away both sets of extra linen to the neighbors in our garage row. They were just about to fit out a place the same as ours, and we'll be left with exactly 2 sleeping spots in the house, his and mine, the way it was when we bought it. We won't be taking guests in for the night anymore. If someone's in trouble, a car breaks down, a tent floods, we'll drive them to the nearest motel ourselves, sit with them till they're sorted, and come back home. We'll stop folding a table down into a bed altogether. We'll eat outside, under the awning, the way a lot of people here do anyway. And inside, They'll just be the house, nothing more. You're probably the last one who'll ever sleep like this with us, on the folded out table, as a guest. You haven't answered. I think you're asleep already. Your breathing's gone quite even. Well, good. Sleep then. I'll sit here a little longer. Listen to the fan pushing the air back and forth through the cabin. And then I'll lie down too, alongside, in my own place, the way I always do. February, late evening, and I'm alone in the showroom. Tomorrow morning it's the stock take, so tonight's my job. Shut up every home that's for sale, check every door, every alarm, and leave last, dropping the keys off at the hut by the gates. The dealership's out on the edge of town. The shed's dark outside, but it's dry in here. Concrete floor, yellow lines painted for the wheels, rows of motorhomes, a paper price tag taped to every windscreen. The lights run on a night setting, just the one lamp lit. That's how it's always been done. They save on the overnight lighting, and after enough shifts like this, I've got into the habit of talking to myself out loud, because the quiet in here is thick enough that you can't hold your own ground in it without a voice. I've worked here 3 years now, sales, and shifts like this before a stock take are nothing new to me. Normally, I don't mind it. You walk the same vehicles you've been showing customers all day, only without the customers, without the questions about spec and price, without anyone asking about the generator or whether the thing can tow a trailer. We've got all sorts here. The big ones, 2 decks to sleep on, with a slide-out section down the side, and the small ones, compact, built for city living, and the used ones that came in on a trade-in, and they all stand mixed together along the same row. Only the price tag and the color of the trim tell them apart, and I know those differences by heart. I start from the gates, like always, with the nearest row. Open the door of the first home, still new, the seats still wrapped in plastic. Check the vents are shut, click the lock, move on to the next one, then another, on down the row. Nothing out of the ordinary, just the job. In the daytime, people wander through here. Someone looks inside, runs a hand along the worktop, asks about the generator, and by evening, I don't even hear those questions anymore. They're that familiar. The walk from the gates to the far wall is short. I know that in my own legs. There's no need to hurry here. The row isn't long. I walk it almost every evening and know it by heart. I recognize every vehicle by the color of its side before I even glance at the price. Halfway down the row, I stop at the big one with the slide out, the priciest thing in the place. The door is heavy on that one. You have to lean your shoulder into it to get it shut properly. I open it, shine the torch inside. Everything's as it should be. Kitchen, sofa, bedroom at the back. Empty and clean. No sign anyone's ever lived a day in it. Though in daylight, families crowd in here trying it on for size. I shut it, move on. And there's still nothing out of the ordinary here. The row's just a row. The walk to the far wall still as short as it was yesterday and the day before. The far wall, the last home in the row, a used one, gray, the doorstep worn smooth. I open it, look in. The torchlight slides over an empty cabin. Nothing. The bed's made. No pillow, no forgotten mug. Every cabin in here's the same. I've never once seen a sign that anyone's spent a night in one. All of it's sterile, all of it waiting for a buyer. I shut the door, turn to walk back to the gates, and it's right there, exactly on the turn, that I notice for the first time the thing I'm about to keep talking about without stopping. My own footsteps. The ones I'd just made walking here to the far wall,
came back to me off the concrete behind me with the ordinary lag you'd expect in an empty hall. An echo's an echo, nothing clever about it. But then I take the first step back towards the gates, and I hear the sound of my own soul twice. Once straight away under my foot, and once more, as if it had come back from somewhere further off, a touch later than it should have. I don't time it. Timing a thing like that is pointless. I just walk and tell myself the hall's a big one. Concrete carries sound oddly, and who knows how it bounces around of an evening with the gates half shut. Not like daytime, when they're wide open and you never hear anything of the sort. I carry on down the way back, past the same homes I've already shut up, the rows on my right now instead of my left, the way it was walking out here, and that's normal too. The way back always runs as a mirror of the way out.
But at the house with the worn threshold, I hear that lag again, and this time it's longer than it was right at the wall. I take a step, then the next one, and the echo of the one before only arrives now, laying itself over the new sound, as if there's another set of feet in the hall keeping pace behind mine, but falling further behind with every step I take towards the gates. I pass the big one with the slide out, the same one I shut halfway down the row, and here I don't hear anything new. The echo seems to even out for a moment, as if the hall's giving me a breather, and I even tell myself it was my imagination, that the concrete really is just an odd carrier of sound, that there's no pattern to it at all, only something off with my own hearing after a long day. I walk on. The shadow from the one lit lamp swings across the wall because I've caught my shoulder on the corner of the nearest vehicle. Nothing to it, the usual thing in the tight space between the rows. I stop at the one with the plastic still on the seats, the same one I opened first. And by rights, the walk back should be nearly done here. The gates are close now. I can see the pale gap of them at the far end of the same passage I walked through such a short while ago on my way to the far wall. Only such a short while ago that walk was easy, and now my legs are heavy, as if the concrete underneath them's gone soft, and I'm breathing quicker than a man out for an ordinary walk across an empty hall has any business doing. I open the door of this one again, just to buy myself a moment. Look inside. Empty, clean, not a mark, not a sound. Shut it, walk on, towards the gates, and say out loud that the row's short. I walk it nearly every evening. Nothing's happening to this hall beyond what happens to any empty concrete space at night. The one lamp under the ceiling, the same one that's always lit for the night, flickers. Once, then again, with enough of a gap between them that I register the first and the second as two separate things, not one. I walk on, the gates still just as close, but it's taking longer to reach them than any sensible measure would allow. I'm not feeling it in hours or minutes. I'm not even looking at a clock at a time like this. I'm feeling it in my legs, worn out from a walk that took no effort at all on the way there, and in lungs that can't get enough air where there was plenty of it on the way out. I pass two more homes I've already checked on the way out. Their doors already shut tight. I've done that already, so there's no reason to stop. Only I slow at each one anyway, as if my own legs are asking for a pause, as if I simply can't manage to walk this row without stopping. Though in the morning, when I come in to open up the shift, I go through it without a single hitch, not out of breath, not even trying. I tell myself out loud that it's ordinary tiredness at the end of the day, that it's been a long shift, that I've been on my feet since morning, and there's even some truth in that. Only I've never before run short of breath from that kind of tiredness in the middle of a flat concrete floor under a roof with nowhere to climb to at all. By the last row before the gates, the echo of my footsteps isn't following me anymore. It's arriving after I've already stopped and gone quiet. I walk, I stop to straighten my jacket, I go still for a second,
And in that stillness, I hear a step, my own, the one I made a moment earlier. It arrives when I'm already not moving, arrives on its own, with nothing following it, and the quiet after it is thicker than the quiet before. The echo never once gets any louder over the whole of this walk, not at the far wall, not here by the gates. The strength of the sound stays exactly the same from start to finish. The only thing that changes is how long it takes to come back to me, and it only ever changes in one direction, only ever towards a longer gap, never the other way.
There's not far left to the gates. I can see them with my own eyes. The pale gap's still standing right where it stood when I walked in here at the start of the shift. But my legs are carrying me towards it slower than they carried me away from it into the hall. And I've stopped trying to explain it with concrete and acoustics, because the explanation won't hold. It comes apart the way the walk itself comes apart underfoot, stretching out by exactly as much as I've still got left to cover. It isn't the concrete that carries sound oddly. It's the hall itself that doesn't want to let me go as easily as it let me in. And I feel it in my breathing and in the weight of each step, in the whole of a body walking the same road twice in one evening, and walking it differently both times. I reach the gates, push through, come out onto the yard in front of the security hut. The light out there is plain, the ordinary kind you get on a street, and I hang the showroom keys on the hook the way I do every single shift. Only tonight, I keep my hand on the hook a moment longer than usual before I let go. I go out through the side gate onto the empty car park and tell myself out loud that tomorrow I'll come in early, before the stock take, help out with the paperwork, but I won't be setting foot in that row again. Someone else can shut it up. I never drove out to the dealership again after that evening. Not the next day, not a week later. They transferred what I was owed straight to my card, no conversation, and I took it because there was nothing there worth explaining. I found work on an open lot on the other side of town, where the motorhomes stand out under the sky. No roof, no walls, no hall over your head at all, just tarmac, a fence, and lampposts. And I walk between the rows there all day, out and back, with no difference at all in the step. I haven't set foot inside a showroom hall since. Not that one, not any other. And I don't take night shifts anymore, whatever they offer to pay for them. I do the stock take at the new place too, but differently. I go round the open lot under the lampposts, home by home, out of habit, saying the same round out loud that I always did, only here the echo never comes back, because there's nothing for it to come back off. No walls, no ceiling, just the air overhead and the lamplight all the way to the fence. If anyone asks me to shut up a shift in some showroom hall as a favor, I turn it down straight away. No explanation. I just say it's not what I do, and that's where the conversation ends. Our garage co-op's out on the edge of town, past the railway line, you know the spot. Rows of tin lockups and brick boxes all mixed in together. Waist-high weeds growing between them. An old table dug into the ground where the pensioners knock dominoes together of an evening. And next door's cat crawls under someone's bonnet to get out of the heat and won't come out till dusk. This was in July, the kind of heat that sits thick and dry. And the dust on the track between the rows lay so deep that if the van ever moved, it'd throw up a cloud taller than the roof. The lane between the boxes is narrow. 2 vehicles can't pass. So mine sits a little sideways, angled to the shared passage, so the neighbors can get by. And from this side, if you stand right here where I'm sitting, you can see the whole windscreen, corner to corner. The cladding's wood, gone dark with age, but not rotten. I keep an eye on it. The roof's flat, tipped a touch to one side so the rain runs off, and the whole box, from the cab to the back end, is shorter than an ordinary lorry, but taller, Squat like that, sturdy. From a distance, it looks half like a hut, half like one of those little sight cabins they used to keep for the night watchman on a building job. I was sat just like this, on an upturned crate, right by the side of it, tapping the panel with my hand, telling my neighbor. 20 years it stood here now, up on bricks, no wheels under it, and it still looks every morning like it's been out on the road all night. I built it myself, back in the 90s, off a written-off chassis the lads from the works let go for next to nothing. I towed it into the garage and spent 3 years, evening after evening, after my shift, patching it together out of whatever came to hand. Plywood for the walls, hardboard over that. I welded the frame myself out of angle iron. My hand still held a weld steady in those days. My eye was true. I'd lay a clean seam first try. I converted the old potbelly stove to run off bottled gas, ran the flue out through the roof so the wind wouldn't blow back down inside, knocked together cupboards out of chipboard, hung the doors on hinges I'd scavenged off old cabinets round the co-op, built a shelf above the windscreen for a bunk that no factory model could touch. Sturdy, wide, I slept up there myself on the nights I went off traveling. It was that kind of time. Doing it with your own hands came out sturdier than buying, and there wasn't much to buy with anyway, so everyone in the co-op built whatever they could manage. 2 more in my row were putting the same sort of thing together. One never finished his, gave up on it. The other finished but sold up and moved on long ago. I drove mine maybe 5 times at most, never further than the region. And then petrol shot up so high I couldn't afford to run it, so I put it up on bricks, sold the wheels to a good bloke who needed them, and the box itself has stood there between the garages ever since. Every spring I'd touch up the paint, tar the roof fresh so it wouldn't leak, patch the cladding here and there, not for looks, just so it stood the way it should, so it wouldn't rot away standing still. My neighbor nods, thinking of his own old tin can too. I know he had new shock absorbers put on not long back. Asks why I never just sold the whole thing off then, since I don't drive it. And I tell him, hold on, let me get to that. Let me tell it in order. See, it's not the standing still that bothers me. I'm used to that. The garage is right there. I come round most days, touch up the paint a bit, sort out the shelf, or just sit like I'm sitting now and listen to the dominoes going in the yard. It's one particular thing, and I wasn't the first one to notice it. A mechanic was the first to spot it. I'd called him round in the spring to listen to the engine, see if it was still alive at all after all those years standing idle. The engine looked sound enough, only the grease had all dried out, needed checking whether it would still pull. He climbed into the cab to check the wiring, sat there a while, fiddled with something under the dash, and then went quiet for a long stretch, and asked if I'd left the window open overnight, because the dust on the dashboard and on the shelf above the windscreen wasn't lying flat. It was lying in stripes, pulled back, as if a headwind had been blowing through some gap all night. I tell him, I never opened that window. It doesn't really open anymore. The hinges rotted out years back. It only holds shut on the catch. I'll show you with my hand how they lay. And I drew lines through the air with my palm, straight, running back away from me. Like that, all one direction. He just shrugged, said, "Your business, engine's fine, starts smooth, just change the oil," and drove off. And I climbed in myself after and had a look, and sure enough, stripes, straight as if someone had run a ruler down the glass from the inside, all pulled the one way, back towards the seat, and the shelf above the windscreen the same, right down to the last inch. Around the same time, I noticed something else, a small thing, didn't think much of it at first. The stuff on the shelf in the cupboards, tins and bits of tools, kept turning up shifted forward by morning, towards the cab, as if the whole van had been braking on the move all night. I saw it once, Made a note of it to myself and put it down to, well, who knows? Some machinery working nearby, shaking through the ground, the shelf tipping a little. Especially after rain, the ground round here settles. I'd already noticed the whole row of boxes shifts a bit every spring. And the curtain over the bunk? I always hooked it back myself so it wouldn't get in the way, wouldn't hang down and gather dust for nothing. And then one morning, I come in, and it's pulled open, off to the side, as if a draft had swept it back. Though the door was locked, the garage was shut up. Nobody had been in. I always check that first. I've only got the one key. My neighbor keeps a spare just in case. And I asked him after. He hadn't touched it either. My neighbor snorts, asks if it doesn't spook me going in there alone of an evening. And I tell him, nah, not scary in the slightest. It's not as if I've run into some sort of goblin in there, is it? I built that machine myself, nut by nut. I know every seam of it. What would I have to be afraid of? Sometime after that, more than a year later, I got it into my head to sell her. Put out an advert. Thought maybe someone would want the same kind of thing for a dacha, or to haul out to some plot far off where a box on wheels comes in handy. A serious sort of man came out from the district to look at it, tape measure and all. Went over every corner, felt the door, checked the hinges, lit the stove to test the draw, crawled under with a torch looking for rust. He sat in the cab to get a feel for how it'd drive if I put wheels back on, and it happened again. He went quiet, then asked, quiet-like, "What's that pattern on your dashboard?" Like it's been picked up at speed, lying in stripes, pulled back, as if the van had been driving into a headwind all night. I explain. She's stood idle a long while. Drafts come through the gaps, that's all it is. The dust settling like that. He nodded, thanked me, said he'd think about it. And never came back. Not a call, nothing from him after that. And I took the advert down myself in the end. And later still, towards the end of summer, a woman from the co-op committee came round, doing her rounds, checking whose place was in order and whose wasn't. Roofs, locks, everything by the rule book. And she looked into my garage too, said, "Well now," stood there like new, so tidy. Not many keep theirs this well looked after. She peered into the cab out of curiosity, just for herself, not for the checklist, just to have a look. And she went quiet as well, asked, quiet-like, "Was your window left open overnight? Look how the dust in there is lying in stripes, pulled back, as if the glass had stood open all night out on the motorway." I gave her the same answer I gave the rest. She stands idle. The drafts get in through the gaps. That's all it is. She wrote something down on her form, for the checklist. Not about the dust, of course, just that the box was in order, and moved on down the row. And I thought to myself that the window's been jammed solid for years now. Last time I opened it was a good few years back, and even then it took some doing, and only for a minute, just to air the place out. But it's not frightening, I'll say that straight out. I've grown so used to that machine over the years, there's nothing in it to be scared of. It's a house like any house, only it doesn't go anywhere. And not once has it done me any harm. The door's never opened by itself. No voice has ever come out of it. Just that dust. That's all there is to it. It's just that after that time, I decided, enough. I stopped letting just anyone in to look round or fix things. Whatever needs doing, I do myself now, bit by bit. My hands still listen to me well enough. I'm not quite old yet, though my neighbor here likes to say I already walk like a granddad. And since then, nobody's been inside. I go in on my own, near enough every day, and whatever's on the dashboard,
Whatever's shifted overnight, I keep that to myself. I don't tell anyone, except you now, just talking. And only because you ask yourself why I still go over to my box the way I do when I'm not putting her back on the road. Then, the year before last, I got it into my head to put the wheels back on. Not to drive her anywhere, just to keep her roadworthy, so she'd stand sturdier, not rot away on the bricks for nothing. So the suspension wouldn't seize up, sitting with no load on it at all. I found 4 the right size at the breaker's yard. Came cheap enough. Lifted her off the bricks with a jack. The lads from the next box over gave me a hand. Took about 3 hours, but in the end, she went down onto the ground under her own wheels. Wheel to wheel, level, no lean to her. These days, I start the engine up once a month. Let it run 20 minutes or so. Listen to how it's going. Check the tire pressure, top it up if it needs it. Have a look at the brakes too, so they don't seize solid. My neighbor asks sometimes whether I'll ever actually take her out on the road, even just a run round the co-op, and I just wave him off and start the engine up again. No answer. Let him listen to how she pulls. I don't even lock the garage now. Took the padlock off back in the spring, opened the door of a morning, climb in for a minute, kick the tires, fussy about it. And the dashboard, if you look close, it's still the same. Still in those same stripes, pulled back, towards the seat, same as it ever was. The tow rope went taut at 6:45 on Monday morning, and from that minute, the caravan hasn't stood still. It lurches forward and stalls again, and I'm standing inside by the crockery cupboard, holding the door shut with my palms so it doesn't swing open and tip out everything we bought the day before yesterday in Ostashkov. The track between Kotovets and Gar, up in the north of the Tver region, turned to soup over Sunday, so badly that by evening we'd sunk right up to the axle. The pickup and the caravan together, dropped into the rut and never moved again. You're in the cab of the pickup now, next to the man towing us with his tractor, and I'm alone back here in the caravan, dragging along behind, and through 2 meters of steel and glass you won't hear me, no matter how loud I talk. So I'll finish saying what I didn't finish saying last night, while there's still time. 20 minutes, he says, and this time I think he isn't lying. The caravan sways over every rut. The jars in the cupboard clink against each other, and somewhere up ahead, I can hear the tow hitch grinding, pulling taut and slackening, and there's no voices at all from the pickup's cab, just the engine, and past that I can't get. We'd driven out to see an abandoned village. You'd been wanting to for ages. I kept putting it off. And on Saturday we finally set out, brought the caravan along so we wouldn't have to rush back, so we could stop wherever the night caught us. A dirt track leads into Gar through an alderwood, easy enough to drive in summer, but on Sunday the rain started in the morning and didn't let up all day, easing off for a while, then thickening again, and by evening, when we'd already turned round to head back, the road had turned to porridge. We sank 2 kilometers short of the tarmac, right where the track dips into the hollow between 2 ridges, and for a while I fought the wheel, rocking the wheels back and forth, hoping to drive us out myself, until I realized I was only burying us deeper. I got out, looked at the wheels. There was no getting out without a tractor, and rang the number a woman at the edge of Kotovets had given us, told us, "Call if you need it, we've got someone who can pull you out." A man answered straight away, calm voice, businesslike, said he lived in the next village, he'd get the tractor going and be with us in about 20 minutes. I thanked him, hung up, went back under the awning where you were already getting the folding chairs out of the boot, and we decided that since we'd be waiting either way, we might as well keep busy rather than sit in the dark watching the clock. 20 minutes passed, then another 20,
and somewhere towards the end of the first hour, I did hear something. A steady, distant engine drone coming from the ridge where the sun was setting, though of course you couldn't see any sun through rain like that. You got out of the cab, stood next to me under the awning I'd rigged between the caravan and the pickup, and we listened to that drone together for 5 minutes, until we realized it wasn't getting any closer, not by an inch. The sound was exactly the same in the first minute as in the 5th, no louder, no fainter, precisely the same, as if the tractor were standing still and just idling somewhere behind the trees. You were the first to say it out loud. Didn't it seem like it wasn't coming towards us at all? I told you then that the sound was probably just carrying over the hollow, that it happens in woods like this. A drone can hold at one volume for a long time before it starts building. And you nodded, but you put the chairs back in the boot before you'd finished your share of supper. I rang him again, and the man answered just as calmly, apologized, said the road had turned bad on his end too, that he was coming round by the field, but he'd be about 20 minutes. And down the phone I could actually hear the engine straining on a rise, precisely the same sound that was drifting over from the ridge. The rain eased off for a few minutes, and I stepped out from under the awning on purpose, walked to the edge of the rut to listen with nothing over my head, no canvas, nothing that could have muffled the sound. The drone was exactly the same, not a centimeter closer than 5 minutes before, though by any reckoning, the tractor should have covered half the distance from the next village to us by then. You stood by the caravan door, watching me stand there in the rain, listening. And then you said you didn't like the lights on the ridge we'd spotted through a gap in the clouds. They weren't moving at all, fixed in one place, like a lamp on a post, when the headlights of a vehicle crossing a field should long since have swung towards us, or at least flickered. I said it was probably the farm next door, that they always had a light on over the yard. But you went quiet and didn't argue, just pulled your coat tighter and stepped back from the edge of the awning to the caravan door. We climbed the rise beside the road to get a look from above. I thought that from higher up it might be clearer how far off the tractor really was, that maybe the woods were just swallowing the sound down below. From the rise it sounded exactly the same, no nearer, no further. The same steady drone, as if the source of it weren't moving at all, just existing somewhere behind the trees on its own account, regardless of whether the man was ringing us or not. You said then that you didn't want to climb up and listen again. That once had been enough for you to understand. There'd be no difference, and there wasn't going to be one, and that we'd be better off sitting in the caravan and waiting. I didn't argue, led you back down by the hand through the wet grass. We climbed inside, drew the curtains, and I said, half joking, that the tractor driver was probably going round and round the same field without noticing. After an hour, I killed the pickup's engine anyway, though it had been no use in the mud for a while now, just so it wouldn't get in the way of listening. Climbed out and stood by the bonnet for one long minute in complete silence, save for the rain and that same drone somewhere behind the trees. It was exactly the same with the engine off as it had been with it running, not a hair's breadth clearer. Then I walked about 200 meters along the road towards the sound, thinking maybe from there the source would show itself. Maybe there was a turning I'd missed on the map. But 200 meters on, the drone was the same, and 100 meters past that, the same again. And when I got back to the caravan, soaked to the knee, I rang once more, and the man answered brightly, apologized for the delay, said he'd got stuck himself, was going round the hollow the long way, would be about 20 minutes. And his voice was thoroughly lively, no shortness of breath, no irritation, as if he were driving down flat tarmac in broad daylight, though around him right now was a waterlogged field and the dead of night, all for the sake of two strangers with a caravan. By midnight, we'd lain down, not properly undressed, the light still on. I wanted it off. You asked to leave it. And I could hear you not sleeping for a long while, turning over, listening to that same drone through the caravan wall, muffled by the blanket but still recognizable. The same steady, no nearer, no further than it had been all evening. I asked you then, in the dark, whether you were hearing the same thing I was, and you answered shortly that you were, and that you didn't want to talk about it anymore. And you turned to face the wall, and I didn't press you, though for the rest of the night I turned over a dozen questions in my head that I never asked out loud. Towards morning, the rain stopped completely, and the sound that had stayed with us all evening and all night at the same volume simply cut off, with no fading, no tapering away, as if somebody had turned a dial and switched it off. He rode up with the tractor once it was already light, about 10 minutes after the sound had stopped, but not from the side we've been listening towards all evening and all night. He came in from the opposite edge of the field, from where there hadn't been a single light, not a single movement. Nothing we'd caught so much as once in all those hours. The man got out, said hello, apologized for taking so long, said he'd only set off half an hour ago, as soon as the rain had eased a little, and there wasn't a trace in his voice of the tiredness you'd expect from a man who'd spent the whole night working his way to us through the mud on the far side of the region. His coat was dry, his boots clean almost to the top, and his hands didn't shake as he unwound the rope from behind his tractor. I didn't ask what he'd been hearing in his own cab all those hours, while he rang us up sounding cheerful and talked about going round through the field. I just helped him hook up the rope, and now here we are moving, and you're sitting up front next to him, and I'm standing back here in the caravan, jolting over every rut, holding the cupboard shut with my hand, finishing telling you what I should have said in the night, that I didn't like that sound either, that I heard it too, that it never once shifted from where it was, and that I simply didn't want you to be frightened on your own while I went round with a torch, pretending everything was under control. They towed us for another 20 minutes to reach the tarmac, and there the man unhitched the rope, took the money I pressed into his hand without counting it, and drove off towards his own village on the tractor, while we carried on under our own power in the pickup as far as the lay-by by the turning, and left the caravan there. Getting it the rest of the way home, that day we simply had no strength left for it, and one wheel had bent coming out of the rut anyway. A month later, I rang the local council, told them the caravan wasn't wanted by anyone, that whoever wanted it could take it, and left them the location and a description. Nobody took it. It's still standing there now, by the turning towards Kotovets, rusting slowly. Someone tried the door once and gave up, and the windows are intact, all three, just grown thick inside with dust and fallen leaves from the nearest copse. We take another road now, the bypass, whenever we need to head north through the region, and we never turn off at that junction anymore, even when the direct way would be shorter. Our boatyard's a small one. One boathouse, a dozen pontoons, the boats hauled up on the bank lying keel up along the fence, and past that a shed for the winch, rusted through by now, creaks whenever it turns. And I've been the caretaker mechanic here since spring, living right in my camper. It's been parked up by the gate 3 months now. It's June, hot since first light today, midges standing over the water in a solid wall, but that's the least of it, because I'm lying under the vehicle, flat on a bit of cardboard, looking straight up at the prop shaft, the radio muttering away from inside the boathouse. Old Slava never once switches his set off for the whole shift, plays the same thing over and over since lunchtime. And out here, my voice probably doesn't carry very well. It's hollow under here. The metal works right up against my face, 20 centimeters or so. No further back to go, nowhere to go. Gina, pass me the 17 mil, there in the box, next to the sockets. There, thanks. Hold the light up a bit higher, it's shining straight in my eyes.
and down where I actually need it, the light barely reaches at all. Gina turned up looking for work at the station later than I did, in May, taken on to get the boats ready for the season and mend the wooden landing stage. And he just stayed on at the boathouse for the whole summer, living in the same wooden cabin the old caretakers used to have, with a little cast iron stove for the cold nights, though there's no need of any stove now, of course. Hot enough in the day that you're pulling for the shade, not the fire. He's a steady sort, not young anymore, hands as used to metal as mine are. Only he's no specialist on cars, knows outboard motors better, which is exactly why he's so much use to me, holding the light, passing things over, steadying what needs steadying. And he doesn't ask more questions than he needs to, except when he notices something. And then he just says it, straight out, no beating about the bush. I've been working here since April, keeping watch over the station at night, doing the rounds of the pontoons, checking the padlocks on the boathouse, and by day, if I've had enough sleep, I fix the vehicle myself. Taking it to a garage in town costs money, and there's no need for it besides. I've known my way around an engine since I was a lad. My father and I ran a garage once. Had to sell it later on, but the hands stayed with me. So, this is how I live now, in this box on wheels. A sleeping berth over the cab, a fold-down stove, a water tank set under the floor. Everything a person needs, only instead of a flat, it's 4 wheels, and the leaf springs under them, and a view of the backwater through the side window if I pull the curtain back, which I rarely do. No time for looking at water, there's always work waiting. Gina comes over from the next cabin now and then to help, same as now, holds the light for me, passes the tools, and I lie underneath turning the nuts and talking, just to keep from going quiet under here. It's an unpleasant kind of quiet, so hollow. My own voice comes straight back at me off the underside, like talking inside a barrel. It started about a month after I first parked up here. I went under that time to check the clamp on the exhaust pipe. It had worked loose ages back, rattling over every bump, and there it was, tightened up, snug even, right down to the last thread, which is more than I'd ever do myself. I always leave a quarter turn of slack so the metal can breathe under load. I stood there a while, turned it with my fingers, lit it up with my phone. Thought maybe it had worked itself tight somehow. Vibration, rough roads. Only that clamp's built so it can't turn itself. There's a single thread on it, and it has to be turned by hand. And turned the very way I hadn't had the right spanner for, not a month back. A week later, it was the prop shaft joint. I looked, and there was fresh grease on it, laid on smooth and even, as though it had just been squeezed straight from the tube, though I hadn't been under that side of the vehicle in weeks, hadn't got round to it. Wasn't any work planned there anyway. Some while after that, it was the leaf spring bump stop, that rubber block that takes the shock. Mine had been cracked right through since winter. I kept meaning to replace it and kept putting it off, and there it was, a new one fitted, the very same make of rubber I'd have bought myself if I'd ever got round to the spares shop in town, which I always meant to visit and never once managed. Nothing broken, nothing missing. The work done so well I couldn't have done it better myself, I'll say that honestly. Neater than my own hands manage. Not a single scratch on the metal around it, no stripped thread, none of that carelessness you leave behind when you're in a hurry, and not a single trace. My bit of cardboard lying exactly where I dropped it the evening before. The tools in the box untouched, laid out in a row the way I'd left them. The ground under the vehicle dry and level, as though nobody had walked there or crawled under it all. Not a handprint, not a knee mark in the dirt, nothing. I did wonder about the lads from the boathouse for a while, whether one of them was moonlighting under there while I was off on the night shift. Only that lot are the sort who sit up round the fire talking rubbish till dawn, not the sort to go crawling under someone else's vehicle. So the thought didn't get past one evening. I let it go. and carried on living the way I always had. Gina was the first one to notice, long before I'd admit to myself that something wasn't right. I'd gone under for the jack that time, and he called through from the wheel. "Look at that," he says. "That joint's spotless, like new. Where'd you get it done?"
I felt it, and sure enough, fresh grease, soft, not that gray caked-on grime that road dust leaves, but as though it had just been put on, and it stayed on my fingers, slick, almost cold, and it wouldn't wash off after, not for ages. I even scrubbed at it with soap under the tap in the boathouse. The second time I noticed it myself, a couple of weeks on, I went to check the mounting plate under the tank. Always oil-streaked and filthy, that plate. And there it was, spotless, scoured clean it looked like, and right along the seam, the very same grease, fresh. I touched it with a finger, and again it stayed on my skin. The same thin coat, the same cool feel as the first time. For a while, I told myself it must be something about the station itself. I'm parked up here by the boathouse, so someone must be getting to the vehicle while I'm on shift or asleep. A place like this has its own goings-on. No telling who walks along the pontoons of an evening. I comforted myself thinking that once I drove off, all of it would stay behind, on the other side of the station fence, along with the boathouse and the winch. My work takes me all over the county though, out to sites across the region. Sometimes I'm away from the base a fortnight at a stretch, and I take the vehicle with me, living on the road wherever I happen to stop. Petrol stations, depots, lay-bys off in a field. And then on one of those trips, over 300 kilometers from here, I stopped for the night at a petrol station outside Ryazsk, a place I'd never been to before. First night ever spent there, and in the morning I went to check the tire pressure. And there it was, on the hub, the same fresh grease, the same thin coat, the same coolness on my fingers, as though I'd never gone anywhere at all. So it wasn't the station anymore. It had traveled with me, tied itself to the vehicle now, had nothing left to do with the place. And somehow that thought didn't make things lighter, but heavier. Though by rights I should have been glad, at least, to have shaken off the station. And after that, wherever I parked her, by the boathouse or 300 kilometers off, within a few days I'd find the same thing again. A joint I hadn't touched myself, clean as though it had been fitted only yesterday, and fresh grease on my fingers, always the same. Soft, as if it came from one and the same tube, though I've never once held a tube like that in my hands, or seen its like in any shop. I started noting where exactly I stopped, just for myself, no particular purpose to it. Sometimes at the weighbridge on the way into a district, sometimes on waste ground behind a depot where the lorries usually pull in for the night, sometimes right out on a turning into a field. Nothing around but grass up to my waist and stars overhead. The places couldn't have been more different, and the find was always exactly the same, as if the whole business had been fixed to the vehicle itself from the very start. Only I hadn't been able to work that out straight away. So I just carried on living, working, driving out to sites and back to the station for my shift. And every so often, I'd go under to check the next joint and find the same thing there. Quite calmly by then, no more questions about it, as though it were part of a service I'd never agreed to. But I wasn't in any hurry to turn it down either. The work was good, honest work, someone else's hands, and the result such that nobody could fault it. And here it is again today, Gina. Take a look for yourself. It wasn't the exhaust I was after this time. I was changing the gasket under the tank. I opened up the plate and it was already clean. Such an even coat, as if it had come out from under a spray gun. And I ran my hand over it with
without even thinking. It's a habit by now. And there it was again. Fresh grease. Soft. And it's on my fingers right now, while I'm talking to you. I keep rubbing it against my trouser leg, and it won't come off at all. Just smears out thin and shines. Anyway, I got tired of being afraid of a thing that does my own work better than I do. My tools, the whole set of spanners and the jack besides, I ended up selling to you, Gina, in the end. Remember that talk we had by the fire, after old Slava had already gone off to sleep and the two of us were still sitting there? I wasn't hard up for the money at the time. I just decided, if it manages fine on its own, what's the sense of me going in there with a spanner and spoiling something that's already standing pretty without me? You took the box without a word, turned the jack over in your hands, only asked whether I was sure I'd never need it again. And I said, sure, take the lot. I've nowhere left to put it anyway, except a shelf under the berth to gather dust. Now, once a season, usually before a long trip, I leave the vehicle out here overnight, right by the boathouse, unlocked, bonnet up, and by morning, everything's sound, adjusted, greased, better than I'd have managed myself in a week, with every tool I ever owned. I've given up on garages altogether. It's a long way there and back. I hardly go under it myself these days, except today, for the company more than anything, just to top up a tire and hold a 17 mil in my hand one more time. And probably the last time at that. Never mind it. Go on then, Gina. Pass me that jack handle. Time to pack this up. Our street runs the length of a concrete wall round the industrial estate, 300 meters or so from one end to the other, gravel and cracked tarmac under the wheels, and along both sides sit a dozen homes on wheels, camper vans, converted buses, trailers with lean-to additions, some up on bricks, some propped on boards, one with an awning strung between the vehicle and a poplar tree, another with a porch knocked together out of old pallets. It's June now, evening, the light long and yellow, drifting along the wall together with smoke from a barbecue. Someone's washing up in a basin by the end camper van, and we're sitting round the shared table, the way we sit most warm evenings, when the day's winding down and there's no more work worth starting. We've been here a good while, some of us longer than others, and we know this street the way you know your own yard. Every vehicle, every awning, every gap in the wall where the cool air comes through from the estate. Our eyes go along the street out of habit, van to van, awning to awning, and there's nothing particular in that look, just the evening check, whether everything's where it should be, whether anyone's light is on, whether anyone needs a hand with a heavy water container. We take a newcomer in calmly, without the questions people ask in other places. He pulls in towards evening, usually towards evening, stops at a free patch of ground between the wall and the verge, gets out to stretch his legs, and one of us is first to wave him over. Settle in, we say. It's quiet here. Nobody will move you on. He parks up, kills the engine, and that same evening, somebody's already bringing him a plate from the shared table. Somebody's telling him which side's easiest to run a lead to the lamppost. Somebody's pointing out where to fill up with water. And somebody else just sits down on the step of his own vehicle and tells him how quiet the street is, how well you sleep here under the far-off hum of the estate beyond the wall. We don't ask where he's from or where he was planning to go next, because next isn't really our street's business. Everyone here is passing through. Everyone's temporary, and it's always been that way, for as long as any of us can remember. The days on the street are much alike, and that's their comfort. In the morning, someone's tinkering under a bonnet,
Someone's hanging washing out to dry on a line strung between the posts. Someone's off for the whole day about their own business and comes back towards evening, when the air cools and smoke rises over the wall from the first barbecue of the night. By dark, almost every vehicle's in its spot, windows glowing steady yellow, and people go from home to home along the street borrowing salt, borrowing a tool, or just sitting down at someone else's table if their own is empty tonight. Nobody here counts how many years they've already stood on this spot, and nobody asks a neighbor why he still hasn't left for wherever he said he was going that first evening. The question just wears away somehow, lost in talk about other things, in shared suppers, in the help that's given here easily, without a second thought. He means to leave in a week, in 2, names some town, some job, some person he's driving to see, and we nod, not asking further. Then the neighbor 2 doors down strips half his engine, lays the parts out on a tarpaulin the whole length of his pitch, and asks him to wait. Wait till Wednesday, I'll be done and cleared up, and meanwhile your way out's blocked by my bonnet anyway. He waits. On Wednesday, the neighbor asks for another couple of days because some part turned out to be the wrong one, has to be stripped down again. And he waits once more. Because what's the rush? It's quiet here. It's good here. Then someone runs a cable straight across his way out, mending the wiring to the lamppost, and the cable lies there a week because pulling it up mid-job is awkward and there's no way round it. The wall on one side, vehicles on the other. Then it turns out the tire garage he was going to reach for new tires is shut for repairs, and there's nowhere else to reach on his own tires, already half flat. And then rain simply comes, and the ground by his way out turns to mud for a week, soft enough that a heavy vehicle's better left alone until it dries. And he understands that himself as well as any of us do, because dragging a stuck home out of the mud is harder than waiting a little longer. The reasons always come from outside, and not one of them looks important on its own. We never keep anyone by force, and that's the truth. You could swear it to anyone. Nobody blocks the way out on purpose. Nobody hides the keys. Nobody says out loud, "Stay." It just happens that leaving's awkward exactly now, and in a month, it's awkward for some other reason, and a month after that, he himself, with his own hands, packs bricks under the axle because the vehicle sits steadier that way, because the rain washes out the ground under the wheels, because it's easier when a home stood down than up on its springs. We watch it unfold the same way every time. First, bricks under one wheel to level it out, then under all 4. Then one day, he takes the wheels off altogether, sells them to some passer-through for next to nothing, because they were only rusting there unused anyway, and the money's more use to him. From that moment, the home stands on the street just as all of us stand here, on bricks, along the wall, without a single wheel underneath. The threshold of every home on the street gets lower, year by year, and we notice it not with the eye, but with the foot. First, a solid step under the door, welded from angle iron or knocked together from a plank. Then the step wears thinner, as if the home were settling into the ground on its own. Then only half a step is left. Then just a small ridge flush with the ground. And then one day, the foot doesn't lift at all anymore. Just a stride off the gravel straight inside, no effort to it. And it happens so slowly that none of us could say on which evening exactly it happened at the house next door. We simply catch ourselves one day walking in to see a neighbor without lifting a foot. And what surprises us isn't that the threshold's gone, it's that it was ever there at all. By his 3rd year on the street, The man who'd parked up third from our lamppost found his own threshold had dropped just the same way. Come evening, walking over to the shared table, nobody looks down at their feet anymore going into his place. Where once you had to step over a plank, now the door swings open flush with the ground, as if over the years the home had settled itself deeper, taken root in the spot, grown into the verge the same way all of us have grown into it. He no longer talks about that town or that person he was once driving to see. He mends other people's engines if he's asked, runs a cable if one's needed, and one day finds himself the one asking someone to wait. Wait till Wednesday, I'll be done. But it's nothing frightening if we're honest with ourselves at this same evening table. People live like this and live well enough, settle in, grow close to a place, and there's nothing wrong in that. Except that a home, in time, stops being what it was at the start. Not a vehicle ready to pull away the moment it wants to, but simply a home grown into the verge so deep that the wheels under it have long looked like a spare, unnecessary decoration. We've lived this way ourselves for decades, and none of us complains out loud, because there's really nothing much to complain about. The neighbors are familiar. The wall round the estate keeps nobody awake. And yet every evening, walking to our own shared table, we find ourselves glancing down at our feet without meaning to. The habit of noticing how much closer to the ground another door has come this year. A habit stronger than any fear. The land beyond the wall was sold in the end. A man in a high-vis vest walked our street from one end to the other, measured something along the verge with a tape, and that same evening the developer who'd bought the plot for building announced it to everyone at once. By morning, exactly one night to clear out, and at first light the machinery would arrive to level the site for the build. And after that deadline, there'd be no more talking about it. We stood beside our vehicles and said nothing, looking at each other over the bricks that had held our homes up for so many years, in place of wheels. And that night, something happened that none of us had managed for years. The all-night tire garage at the edge of town opened specially for us, and a line of homes with axles still sound enough to take new tires headed straight there. Within a couple of hours, they'd sold out everything they had, and everything brought over from the depot next door as well. Whoever's axles had long since rusted through, or been stripped off along with the suspension, was hauled out by tow trucks straight on the stands, bricks and all, dragged through the gravel, and all night we heard that scrape of metal on tarmac the whole length of the wall, a sound that had never once been heard here before, because before that, nobody had ever left so fast. The tow truck reached the home of the man who'd parked up third from our lamppost near the very last, and the whole street helped feed the tow rope under his chassis, because his threshold had long since gone flush with the ground, and carrying out the last of his things meant not lifting a foot at all. A stride off the gravel carried you straight inside. By first light, where the street had been, there was only an empty verge left. Gravel, trodden patches where vehicles had stood for years, a scatter of bricks along the wall, offcuts of cable dropped in the rush, and pale rectangles of tarmac where the ground hadn't faded under the wheels, because there'd been no wheels under those homes for a long time. The developer sent the machinery at first light, exactly as promised, and by noon there was nothing left of our street that anyone could have recognized. Since then, not one of us has ever parked next to another one of our homes again. We scattered, one by one, wherever we ended up, and that night was the last time we spoke of ourselves as one street. Now one of us stands on a paid car park at the edge of another town. Another found a plot in a settlement of weekend cottages and had it registered properly,
Another still just keeps driving without a fixed place, stopping a day or two and moving on before there's any chance of taking root in the ground. We talk about it separately now, each from wherever we are, and none of us has a neighbor left to walk in on of an evening for the shared table, without lifting a foot before the door. Right, 1 second, I'm putting the phone here on the tripod so the lake shows behind me. There, that looks level. Filming tonight's episode from a wild camp in Karelia on a lake with no name. The track turned to gravel a good hour back. The nearest village is 30 kilometers off. And that, honestly, is exactly why I drove out here. I wanted to show you one ordinary night with no music over the cuts and no editing tricks. Just a camera on a tripod and a proper talk about what it's actually like living in a converted van, not for the pictures, but every single day. Not many subscribers on this channel, I know, but for some reason it matters more to me to film it honestly for the few who watch right to the end than to chase a pretty shot for some passing viewer who will scroll on after 10 seconds. Behind the van, I've got the generator running. I'm keeping it on deliberately for light to film by. The lamp's hanging on its cable over the folding table, and the midges have already swarmed all over it. Sorry if a few flit through the shot. There's no getting rid of them entirely. I'll wave a hand past the lens once or twice and carry on talking. I picked this spot ahead of time, the day before yesterday, when I was mapping out the week's route. I wanted a proper dead end, where the track runs out at the rocks and there's nowhere further to go, so there'd be no neighbors anywhere near, no other vans like mine, no tents, no fishermen with outboard motors. Before all this life on wheels, I worked in an office. An ordinary enough story, I'd guess, for half the people watching channels like this one now. A rented flat, a mortgage that felt like an impossible luxury. One package holiday a year if you were lucky. At some point, I worked out how much I'd handed over in 5 years renting a room in another city, and decided that money could buy an old van instead. One I could fit out myself, and I could find work remote or on the road. My line of work allows for it. My family thought I'd lost the plot at first, then got used to it. Now they ring once a week, ask where I am and what's outside the window. I forward them photos, and I pass on the finished videos once they're up. I fitted this van out myself, 3 winters running. Started in a mate's garage before I had the money for a place of my own. Hang on. The lamp over the table just dipped strangely. The light seemed to get pressed down for a second and let go again. It didn't flicker. It properly dipped, like someone switched on something heavy right next to the cable for a moment. Sorry, probably a midge caught the bulb. I'll trim this bit out in the edit later. Start again. From where I was talking about the garage. Right, so 3 winters went on the paneling and insulation. In spring, I usually redo the wiring from scratch because something always gets damp over winter. And in summer, I drive to where there's nobody at all, well away from tarmac car parks with a barrier and a fee for the pitch. I found this spot by accident, on an ordinary map, no markers, no reviews, just a blue patch in the forest and a track that stops dead at the rocks. You can't see the water right now anyway, it's dark. Past the table there's just a black stripe, and there's not much to say about it. Except the midges are noticeably worse here tonight than at any other camp I've stopped at this summer.
The generator's old but reliable. Runs steady all night. Burns the same amount of fuel summer or winter. I keep a close eye on that because the nearest filling station is an hour and a half from here. There it goes again. Sorry, the light over the table's dipped a second time, exactly the same way. Like something heavy got switched on nearby and switched off a second later. Odd that the generator doesn't even change its sound when it happens. It just keeps chugging along, steady, same as a minute ago. Hasn't dropped revs once in all these months. I'll take a look at the cable when I get the chance. Maybe there's a loose contact somewhere, or the insulation's cracked with age. And it's true, I did check that cable before today's filming. Ran my hand along it from the socket right up to the lamp, and it's warm the whole length, even when nothing's plugged in and nothing should be generating any heat at all. No splitter, no spare plug, just the bare cable itself. At the time, I decided it was old insulation, put it down to that, and forgot about the cable until this evening. And now, talking it through, I've remembered it again. That cable, by the way, I bought from an ordinary hardware shop right before heading out for the season. Nothing special, standard gauge for my load. I even joked to the camera back then that a cable like that would outlast me. And now, here I am, touching it with my hand at every camp, just out of habit, checking whether it's gone warm again. There's another thing I haven't told you about before, because I couldn't quite work out how to explain it without looking odd on camera. In the mornings, once I've switched everything off for the night, lights, chargers, even the fridge on its own supply, the battery's somehow flat by dawn, as if something had been drawing it down, drop by drop through the night. Though there's simply nothing left to draw, it's all deliberately powered down. I check it myself before I sleep. Walk around the van and flick the switches off one by one. At first, I blamed a leak somewhere in the wiring, changed the terminals, fitted a new battery at the start of the season, even added a second one as a spare just in case. No difference. Come morning, it's the same picture. No charge left, and I can't put it down to the battery simply aging anymore, because the new one behaves exactly the way the old one did back in spring, and the spare, which I've never even wired in, still ends up half flat by morning. I even tried leaving just one small night light switched on overnight, deliberately, to see if that would drain by morning, and that night light was still burning exactly as bright at dawn as it had been the evening before, as if the whole thing had nothing to do with how many things are switched on, and everything to do with something else. Something I can't touch with my hands or see with my eyes, only notice from how light and hollow the battery casing feels by morning, and from these very dips in the light. There it goes again. Sorry. The lamp dipped and came back, and the gap between that one and this one was noticeably shorter than before. Right, back to where I started. Sorry, lost my thread. The lamp over the table's dipped again. I'm not letting myself get distracted by it anymore. I'll just carry on talking. The story itself matters more to whoever's watching than my technical trouble with the light. My layout's simple. A bunk over the cab, a fold-down table, a water tank set in the floor. Nothing extra, so I can drive anywhere and stay as long as I like, without depending on a hookup at some site or on someone else's say-so to park up. I used to put a list of everything I carry in the description of every episode, then stopped. It seemed like the only people interested were the few actually thinking of trying this life themselves, and everyone else found a list of tools and jerry cans dull to read. In the mornings, I usually make coffee on the stove, sit on this same folding chair, film a short clip for the end of the episode, then break camp and carry on along the route I mapped out at the start of the week, none of which has anything to do with what happens to the lamp at night. That morning stretch is untouched by it. The light above me's holding steady for now, the lamp's hanging quietly. It's just that my memory's already somehow tuned itself to expect the next dip. I catch myself talking while keeping half an eye on the lamp at the same time, and I couldn't tell you exactly when that started. I know this is probably wasted seconds for the finished episode. I'll have to cut all these dips out in the edit so they don't pull the viewer away from what matters.
But right now, I haven't got the energy to get up and deal with it. I've already checked the cable. The generator's running steady, same as an hour ago. The fuel's not going down any faster than usual. I checked the tank on purpose before I started filming, and the light over the table keeps on dipping anyway, and it seems to be happening more often now. There it goes again. The lamp dipped briefly and came straight back, and right on its heels, before I'd even finished the sentence, it dipped again. And these two dips are sitting so close together now that there's barely time to draw a breath between them and carry on talking. I'll keep telling you about this camp regardless. About the rocks by the water, about how it's beautiful here in the morning with the sun coming up right over the lake. I usually film that as a separate short clip for the end of the episode, and I'll probably film it again today if I sit it out till morning with this lamp over my head, and I'll sort the wiring out in daylight after that. This clip will probably just settle into the archive too, never make it into an episode. I've been doing that for a while now with footage from these particular places. I film it, watch it back at home in daylight, and something won't let me put out anything from here specifically. I'll explain it properly one day, if I ever explain it to myself, let alone to any of you. In a year, near the end of August, I'll still come back to this exact clearing, bring another battery with me, fully charged, buy it in advance especially for the trip. I won't take it off the van. I'll just leave it under the same pine tree, cover it with a bucket against the dew and the midges, and weigh it down with a rock so it doesn't blow off toward the lake. And I'll drive off the same day to get on with things. I won't spend another night here, and I won't pitch a tent. And I'll take last year's battery with me. It's always flat, the way no battery in my boot has ever gone flat over a single day's drive. And just take it into town for recycling, without opening the casing and without checking what happened to it over the year under that pine. I still haven't put out a single episode about this place, though I've got enough footage by now for a good 10 of them. And this time, I probably won't either. I'll just put the memory card away in the box with all the others, labeled by hand with the date and the name of the lake, one I made up for myself a long time ago, since it never had one marked on any map anyway. Listen, I'll just talk this through, alright? And it'll send whenever it sends. There's no signal at all out here. We're right in the middle of the river. The ferry's moving slow, another 20 minutes or so to the far bank, and that little send icon just keeps spinning and spinning on the screen. The message won't go. Well, let it spin. I still need to say this out loud to someone, and it might as well be you, seeing as you welded this roof with me 8 years back in Dad's garage, evenings after work, remember? You kept saying I was going overboard with the reinforcing ribs, and I didn't listen. Did it my own way, laid an extra layer of metal on top for a margin, and you laughed and said I'd probably drive it 10 years without a single scratch anyway. Well, this is exactly what the conversation's about now, this roof. And I wish you'd been right back then about the margin, because it turns out it was never about the metal. I'm standing up on the open top deck now, by the rail. They don't let anyone down to the cars on the crossing, that's the rule. Passengers up top, into the warm lounge. There's a buffet there, tea, coffee in paper cups, yellow light, and nearly everyone's gone up there, and I'm the one who stayed out here alone. The wind off the river right in my face, but I can see my van from up here, through the deck grating. The roof's white, familiar. Standing down there among someone else's lorries, under a floodlight. And I'm standing here looking down at it, and I can't get to it. They won't let me. The queue for the ferry ramp was long today. 15 vehicles or so lined up along the bank ahead of us. Someone with a trailer, someone with a boat on the roof. All of us waiting for the ferry to cross over and come back. Headlights going out one after another. People stepping out to stretch their legs, smoking by their bonnets, talking quietly among themselves. I was standing by the van too, waiting my turn, and when I finally pulled up to the ramp itself, that's when the ferryman stopped me, waved his hand so I wouldn't follow the lorry ahead in. I drive this same route every autumn, the same crossing. I know nearly all the crew here by sight, and I've never had a problem before. I'd just drive on, park where they told me, and that was that. Here's the thing though. It stopped clearing. Not suddenly, not all at once, gradually, but it has. And this is the hardest part to say out loud. Because it sounds daft, and I'm going to say it anyway. You know I've been driving it 8 years, out on jobs all summer, back to the winter yard come autumn. And every single one of those years, it's cleared everything I've pointed it at. Any archway into any campsite, any barrier with a height limit. Not one scratch on top, not once. Never so much as brushed anything. And then here, on this very ramp about an hour ago, the ferryman waves me down, stops me, walks right up, leans in, looks up at the roof from below, shakes his head, and says it before I've even said a word myself, before I've even got the tape measure out. "You won't clear it," he says. "The roof will scrape the beam inside the hold. They've got low headroom down there. Vans taller than yours have had to turn round before, and not just the once." I show him the tape anyway, dig out the papers. The height's the same as it's always been, to the centimeter, same as it was 8 years ago when I bought her, and he just shrugs. "I've got my own measure," he says. 30 years eye on this crossing, and by it you won't clear. So here I am now, up top, listening to the diesel, looking down at the roof through the grating, and thinking back, brother, on how all of this started. And it adds up to something I don't much like, once you lay it out in order, one thing after another. A long while back, my very first year with her, I was driving a forest track heading north, a narrow one, branches closing in low over the ruts, and the roof scraped against them then, lightly, with plenty of margin still to spare, the vent cover crackling a bit up top, and I didn't think twice about it at the time. Well, it's a forest track. All sorts catch on you along the way. Forgot about it by the next day. A year or two on, I was pulling into a campsite under the entrance arch. Concrete, low, an old bit of building work. And there the roof scraped again, more noticeable this time. A short, dry sound up top, like someone had run a fingernail once along metal. And I decided then it must be the roof rack. That was the highest thing sticking up. Took it off that very month, sold it to a neighbor in the garages, so I wouldn't be pushing my luck for nothing. A few months after that, on a different road, under a flyover, where the beam's not marked properly, no sign, no markings at all, the roof scraped again. Somewhere different this time. Caught the air conditioning unit and the aerial together. The margin was already quite small by then. I took both off, the aircon and the aerial. Drove 2 weeks with no radio because of it. But I thought, right, that's it. Nothing sticking up now. I'll clear anything, anywhere I point her. And about 3 weeks ago, at a car park by a completely different campsite, at a new restrictor, just a plain length of pipe over the entrance, the roof scraped once more, metal on metal, short and dry. Exactly like that very first time with the branches, only there was hardly any margin left by then. Just millimeters. After that last time, 3 weeks back, I went and bought myself a tape measure specially. Keep it in the door pocket now. Check the height myself before I go anywhere near an unfamiliar gate. Took her to the official weighbridge too. They measure the clearance along with the weight there, checked it against the papers. Same height as when I bought her. Not a centimeter added on top. The roof's clean. I've run my own hands over it. Smooth, even. Nothing's grown on it or gone crooked. No extra seam, no swelling anywhere. The inspector at the weighbridge was baffled himself. Kept turning the papers over. Said the figures matched exactly, down to the letter. Said it was strange then that I wasn't clearing things. Maybe it's the eye of whoever's turning you round that's off. Even offered to send his own crew out, measure again first thing, in daylight. I said yes. We settled on next week.
Doubt it'll show anything different, but let them measure again. Can't hurt. And I'm not arguing with him. Why would I? I don't properly understand where it's coming from myself. I only know one thing. The margin keeps getting smaller, and the sound up top's always the same. Short, dry, like someone running a finger along the roof and letting go straight after. So here I am, up top, and there she is, down below, standing among strangers' vehicles, the roof dead white and even under the floodlight. And I can't get to her now, no way at all. The deck's fenced off with grating right to the shore, and it's only through the bars that I can see her, waiting down there, along with me. The wind's proper cold, October already, damp with it. A gull somewhere out in the dark over the water crying the same note over and over. The diesel humming steady, no brakes in it. The deck trembling faintly under my feet from the engine somewhere inside the hull. And all the vehicles below are silent, engines off for the crossing. Only my roof shining under the floodlight brighter than the rest, as if it had been put on show for me on purpose, so that just now, before we reach the shore, I'd think this whole thing through properly. No rush, taking my time, seeing as there's nowhere to rush to anyway. The ferry moves at its own pace, and there's still no signal, same as there wasn't before. So that's it then, brother. I've already decided, standing here looking down. The moment I'm off this ferry, I'll drive straight to the winter yard and deal with that roof properly, once and for all, not bit by bit the way I've been doing it, putting off the worst of it each time. I'll take off whatever's still up there, down to the last bit of metal, the vent grill over the bed, the aerial bracket I never got round to last time, too lazy. I'll clear the whole lot off the roof in one evening, and I'll weld the hatch itself shut for good, so it's flat up there, no single edge sticking up, nothing left for anything to catch on. I know there'll be no roof light in the van then, no ventilation either. I'll have to keep the windows open more, crack the little vents while I'm driving. Well, fine. I'll get through this one winter somehow, but at least I'll know for certain there's nothing up there left to catch on. Smooth metal and nothing else. And I'll keep carrying that tape measure in the door pocket, get it out before every new gate, every new arch. Measure it myself, with my own hand, rather than trust the paperwork from the showroom. I don't trust paperwork anymore, not after today. The ferry gives a stronger shudder than usual, changes course slightly. Must be turning in towards the shore now. There are lights over there. The far bank's clear now, hardly any distance left. The send icon's still spinning and spinning on the screen. I look at it for a second, then look down through the grating again, at my roof, white, even, waiting there among the strangers' vehicles. And I realize there's nothing left to say. I've already said everything I wanted to say to you in these 20 minutes. The house never came online. This icon just keeps spinning away for nothing. And I press my finger on the recording, hold it a second, choose delete, watch it vanish from the list along with everything I've just told you. Put the phone away in my jacket pocket and stand like that all the way to the jetty, looking down at my roof, the one I'll soon be cutting back to the last bolt, the last rivet. Down below, behind the grating, the engines start up one after another. The ferry knocks against the jetty wall with a dull iron thud. Someone from the lounge is already coming down the gangway past me, wrapped up in their coat, hurrying to their car, and I stay by the rail a while longer still, until that last light in the row on the far bank turns into a whole string of lamps along the quay. At home, later, a couple of weeks on, I weighed all the offcuts out of pure curiosity, laid them out side by side on the workbench, the vent grill, the bracket, the stub of the aerial, the
the stump of the roof rack, and the tape measure came out at exactly 17 centimeters of what used to stick up on top and doesn't stick up anywhere on that roof anymore. And ever since I've cleared everything, wherever I point the van, under any arch, under any barrier, without so much as a touch up top.
I opened this chat back in April, when the club was still pulling together a crowd for the May trip, and the route was my own idea. Drive down in convoy to the north gate of the nature park, pull up for the evening on the clearing in front of the barrier, and in the morning, the moment it opened at 7, go through all together. No queue, no jostling on the dirt track. By evening, everyone had rolled in, as agreed. All 9 vehicles, one after another, some earlier, some a little later, and we drew up in a wide semicircle facing the gate, the barrier down in front of us, the gatehouse dark beside it without a single light on. A notice board with a map of the trails off to one side, faded to nothing but a gray smudge, and beyond it, only the dirt track running off into the trees, and past that it was properly dark. No lamp, no gap in the branches anywhere. By nightfall, the mist had settled low, reaching just up to the wheels and no higher, and the vehicle stood in it as if floating on slow, flat water. And for the first hour, the chat was quiet and homely. Someone posting that they'd got the leveling legs down. Someone else that they were lighting the burner for tea. The usual travel chatter, nothing worth remarking on. Victor, who has the oldest vehicle in the convoy, wrote thanks for the tip about the pitch, though nobody has suggested anything to him yet. And at the time, I put it down to him mixing up the group chat with private messages, where the day before we really had talked about which way was best to face the slope. Our convoy's a mixed bag, everyone in something different. Victor has an old Transit converted into a camper back in a previous life of the vehicle. The Volkovs have a brand new Caravan, bought this year just for trips like this. Cap and Nastia have a compact camper van where you can barely turn round between the bed and the hob. Liuda has a small motorhome built on a delivery van, plastered in stickers from every park she's ever been to. And 3 more were traveling with us from another club, joined through a mutual friend, and I knew them less well. I only remember that one of them introduced himself in the chat simply as neighbor 2 pitches over, and stayed under that name for the whole night. By 9, everyone was in place. The ones with generators had them humming quietly. The ones without made do with torches and flasks. And the chat ran along in bits and pieces. Someone asking if there was a shop open nearby. Someone mentioning they'd brought a spare gas bottle. Someone just writing about the mist, which, by then, had already crept right up to the wheels. Victor's the traditional head of this club, has been since earlier trips. He's the one who started this chat in the first place, and he's usually the first to remind everyone of the site rules. But this time, he stayed quiet longer than usual, as if waiting for someone else to speak first. And when he finally posted that odd thank you, I decided he must just be tired from driving and getting his messages mixed up. Some 20 minutes later, Marina, she travels with her husband Oleg, in their diesel motorhome 2 pitches over from me, did post a piece of advice. Park a little further left because the ground's flatter there, and otherwise you'll catch the rut turning in the morning. She wrote it after Victor's message, not before, and I noticed that, but put it down to a delay in the signal. Out here by the forest, the phone only catches a bar every now and then. Everyone had been complaining about it all evening. The conversation moved on. Someone remembered reading a clause in the park rules that said you couldn't drive in before opening under any circumstances, even if the barrier happened to be left ajar, and everyone agreed easily enough, because everyone already knew that. It had been on the park website a year ago too, back when we booked our place on the list. Then Liuda, who travels alone in her little van, usually the quietest one in the chat, sent a voice message. And in it, she said she'd read somewhere about another clause, that you're only allowed to stand on this clearing for 1 night, and if you stay longer than that, it counts as camping without a permit. And there was some fine attached.
though she couldn't remember the figure. Nobody asked her for a link straight away. People just agreed, because it sounded plausible enough. Parks do love rules like that, and the conversation drifted off towards who'd got their permit where and when. About 10 minutes later, I wrote, "Yes, I see," in reply to a photo of a rut that nobody had mentioned yet, and the photo of that very rut, deep and blurred along the left edge of the clearing, only came through from Cap, the young man traveling with his girlfriend in the compact camper, some 10 minutes after my reply. And when it arrived, I read back over my own message and couldn't find anything else it could possibly have been answering. I wrote about it in the chat, half joking, that my phone seemed to be running ahead of time, and Oleg replied that the same thing had happened to him back in March at another site, that he blamed the poor signal then and forgotten about it, and only now had it come back to him. The night went on, and the talk only grew. Because nobody much felt like sleeping, the clearing was lit up with windows almost right round the circle, and the messages stopped being tips and started being rules. Proper ones, one after another, each from a different person, and each worded a little differently. The Volkovs, a couple who've been traveling with the club for years now, wrote that they remembered a clause saying the engines on this clearing could never be switched off at all, because the ground here was supposedly too soft under the wheels, and without the engine running, a vehicle could sink in by morning. And someone else added that they'd heard specifically that you weren't allowed to step past the edge of the marked-out clearing, because beyond that line it was already parkland, and you weren't allowed in there before opening even on foot. People kept asking each other where the clause came from, who'd read the whole thing, who had a photo of the notice board with the full text, and everyone remembered something of their own, slightly different, the words in a slightly different order, but the general sense matched up for all of them, and nobody could send a link, or a photo, or even a clause number. Someone suggested phoning the park office right then, at night, to check for certain, but there was no signal at all near the gatehouse, and nobody was seriously going to ring the regional switchboard at that hour, so the whole idea stayed just talk, without a single attempt to check it outside the chat itself. Everyone was sure they'd read it themselves, personally, sometime back at the start of the planning, and everyone was faintly surprised now that they couldn't find it. Neighbor 2 pitches over wrote that he definitely had the text saved in his browser bookmarks, went to check, and found neither the bookmark nor any browsing history for that day, though he swore he'd read it that very evening before setting off, had prepared specially. Nastya, Cap's girlfriend, remembered that on the way into the region, someone from another motorhome at a petrol station had told them about similar conditions, only the wording there had sounded a little stricter, something about not even standing with the door open beyond the markings, not just stepping outside, and the chat agreed with her politely enough, though nobody really tried to explain the difference between the two versions. The two just settled down side by side in the conversation, as if both were true at once. Getting on for 3 a.m, the chat was in the middle of arguing over whose wording was more accurate, about the second night on the clearing, and Marina wrote, "Agreed, that sounds better," before anyone had actually proposed the new wording yet. And a minute later, Lyuda really did propose it, almost word for word the way it stayed in the conversation afterwards. By then, I'd stopped looking for explanations. I just noted to myself that something really was off with the signal out here. Everyone had had the same thing happen at least once that night. Someone wrote that a notification reached them before the message itself. Someone complained that a message showed as read before they'd even opened it. And people blamed the phone mast beyond the forest, the mist, anything at all, as long as it didn't hold things up for long. Because it was getting colder outside. And the conversation carried on evenly anyway, calm, unhurried, moving in the same direction as the night itself. By 6 a.m, the vehicles stood exactly within the markings, all the engines idling, though nobody had actually agreed not to switch them off. It had just worked out that way over the course of the night, on its own. and not one door had opened past the line on the tarmac in all those hours. At 6:45, Victor wrote in the chat that he was packed and waiting for the gate to open, and that they'd decided to leave the engines running right up to the barrier. Though nobody in the chat had actually said that decision aloud yet at that minute, it only appeared in the next message from Oleg in exactly the same words. At 7 sharp, the gatehouse came to life. Someone stepped out, raised the barrier, and the convoy went through, one after another, calmly, without a single hitch, spread out to their sights, and the weekend went well. Sunny, no trouble at all. Everyone shared photos afterwards in the chat. The lake, the evening campfires, the ordinary summer chatter of a big club. By the next season, when we gathered for the same route again, a new sign had gone up at the gate. Neat, metal, with that very text people had recounted so differently that May night, in dozens of different words. And the wording on the sign matched the final version from the chat almost to the letter, as if someone had simply lifted the finished wording straight out of the conversation and cast it in metal. When asked at the park office who'd ordered the sign, they said signs were put up by a contractor working from a general list of jobs for the season, and they couldn't lay their hands on the list itself just then. Promised to check, and never called back. Victor even wrote to the park office directly, asked if there was a full text of the rules for the clearing in front of the gate anywhere, so he could keep a printout for the future. And all they sent back was a generic link to the website, where no separate clause about the clearing turned up at all. Only the general park visiting rules. Nothing about camping overnight by the barrier. In the club chat, the news was discussed calmly, like any ordinary bit of everyday business. Someone took a close-up photo of the sign. Someone joked that at least now nobody could call it a lie. Someone wrote that they were glad it was finally all written down in one place, and the conversation quickly turned to where to park this time and who'd reach the gate first. Neighbor 2 pitches over was with us again that time too, had come back, and the first thing he did was photograph the sign and post it in the chat right next to his old line about the browser bookmarks, without a single comment, just side by side. And that season, the night at the gate passed quietly, the chat full of ordinary road talk, and nobody brought up any clause again.